Page 25 in your books, Genesis 38. We're going to roll through this chapter and then get into chapter 39. As mentioned previously, it appears like this is just kind of thrown in the middle of the context and just kind of out of nowhere. And I think it's just giving us some ideas and trying to get us to contrast the goodness of Joseph, the righteousness of Joseph in comparison to his brother, and the wickedness of his brother Judah. Because if you read through this whole chapter, which I'm not going to read every verse, but if you read through this chapter, you're going to see just not a good guy. You know, some might try to allude to the fact that he appears to try to make some moral standing judgment or decision where he's like, well, let's not kill him, let's just sell him. And again, I've already made that point that I don't think that's any better. I don't think that necessarily makes him in a good standing. And his decision making just continues to go far left. It continues to go downhill. And because some of the things that you see here, there's really no good way to put it. But what kind of women is he looking for? Anybody want to take a stab? He's looking for prostitutes, right? So, I mean, there's really no good way of spinning it. That's the kind of dude he was. That's what he was interested in. And so, he's looking for prostitutes because that's kind of how him and Tamar end up working out their little deal, right? Which, he was somewhat deceived in that. But he's got some sons, and Onan. And what are some interesting things about them? Yeah. So they were both wicked, not in good standing, right? So suppose, just for a moment, who influenced them? Their daddy, Judah. And so it's not a stretch to say, look, not a good person, not the best decision maker. They made their bed, now they have to sleep in it, and their wickedness brought them death. It didn't bring them life. Because Tamar, she ends up as a widow, if you will. And the Levite custom of that time, that's what day 5 shows here, of marrying a dead brother's wife. So he didn't have any children. God kills him. So guess what? Now the brother, who's next in line, has to step up. And he has to produce children so that his brother's lineage can continue. So what does he do? What does Onan do? He doesn't step up to the plate, does he? I mean, there's no good way of spinning it. I mean, I would say we're all adults in here. We got a few kids in here, so we need to kind of keep it PG. But he doesn't fulfill his role and duty to his family. And so what does God do? He says, you're wicked, and kills him for it. And so Judah, you would have thought, maybe, just maybe, that would have kind of opened his eyes a little bit, right? Because he ends up having another son, right? So what does he do with that son? Does he say, hey, go with Tamar? Does he do that? No, he tells her to remain a widow, right? Go back to your father's house. Also, Judah is just this great guy, isn't he? I mean, everything we've said up to this point, he's just a wonderful person to be around. No, not at all. Onan refuses to do what he was supposed to do. God killed him. So you would think that the next brother, you see, verse 11, like I said, I'm not going to read every passage, but you look at verse 11. Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. Shelah. However you want to pronounce it. I don't do good with Hebrew names. But until he grows up, you remain a widow. Now, was that his intention? Does he follow through with that plan? All his decisions so far seems to indicate that he could tell you something, but could you rely on him and his word? No. You can't rely, because what's the pattern? Consistently, what has he been doing? He's been serving himself. And so he sends poor Tamar off to her father's house and remain a widow. And then he starts looking around for prostitutes. He's going through, he's looking for prostitutes, and Tamar finds out that he's in the area. So what does she do? She dresses herself up as a what? And then what do they exchange? Y'all remember what they exchange? Yeah. So they make an exchange. Your seal, your cord, your staff that's in your hand. Verse 18. Bracelets. And so they exchange, they make the great exchange. That's what we're going to call it tonight. Yeah. Oh, Mama raised no dummy. Because she ends up using that against him. But obviously, so they do the deed. And so he goes back to get his stuff, and she's nowhere to be around. And he starts asking around, hey, where's the prostitute that hangs out around here? And everybody's like, what prostitute? So you would have thought that he'd be like, ding, 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 I just got taken. And he did. Because you go down near to the end of the chapter, let's see here, verse 24. Came about 3 months later that Judah was informed, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot. And behold, she's with child by harlotry. And Judah's response is, bring her out and let her be burned. Now, again, he doesn't realize that he's the daddy. And so I guess what I want to try to get out of this just momentarily is don't be this person. Don't go out doing wicked things. And then all of a sudden, when nobody, when people start to look, when people start to whisper and talk, and you hear about the wickedness of others, then you stand up and try to act all righteous, as if you've never done wrong. I think that's a story that we ought to take from this, because that's kind of how he is right now. He's like, well, she should be burned. Yeah, what's he guilty of? He's guilty of a whole lot. Bring her out, let her be burned. And so it was while she was being brought out that she sent to her father-in-law saying, I am with child by the man to whom these belong. So please examine and see whose signet ring and cords and staff are these. Uh-oh. He recognized him. Judah recognized him and said, she is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son. And he did not have relations with her again. So you see how all this is playing out. You see how easy it is to kind of get caught into our own self-reliance and self-righteousness, and we look at the evil of in the choices of others, and we can see it. We can see that they clearly are sinning against God and sinning against their brethren. But what did it take for him to realize his sin? Basically, it being slapped right back in his face. Some people you can't even do. Some people don't. They don't have any shame. But now that she produces the signet ring, the cord, and everything, guess what? He recognizes that was blackmail. She's got him. And so the rest of the chapter is about the giving of birth. She's got twins in her womb, and it's the same type of situation that's been going on for some time. You have role reversal. What did we have with Ishmael and Isaac? In the grand scheme of things, even though biologically he was the first, but he was technically the second. What about Jacob and Esau? You see the role reversal that's going on? And so we see God's purposes still continue to move and work out even throughout the wickedness and sinfulness of man. Because Tamar is going to be listed in genealogy. In fact, I believe there's a total of at least 5. I think Matthew's account records 5 women, if I recall correctly, which is kind of rare because typically women aren't listed in genealogies during this time, as when people would write out and list women weren't listed. But Tamar gets listed as one of the women in Matthew's account. And but here you've got these twins being born, verse 28. It took place while she was giving birth. One put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his head, saying, this one came out first. But he doesn't really come out first, does he? His hand goes back in, and then here comes the other one. Came back as he drew back his hand. His brother came out. Then she said, the midwife, she said, what a breach you've made for yourself. So she named him Perez. And so that's what that name means, is breach. And afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his head, and his name was Zerah. And so, again, we're seeing role reversal taking place and transpiring here with these individuals. It's countercultural. Some people, some scholars and commentators, they want to kind of figure out, what's the significance of the scarlet thread. I think it was just when they knew that they had twins, that's a marker of this one was the first. But then it didn't work out that way. I mean, yeah, his arm came out first, but the whole body didn't come out first, right? And so that was some nuance. That's just a little bit of sidebar material. So again, I think chapter 38 is just for us to look at and see that the wickedness and the overall evil surmising and choices of Judah versus Joseph, because now in chapter 39, we're really going to start to see Joseph's life to bloom, if you will, and not necessarily bloom for the better. Now, I will say this is something important to note here. when going throughout Joseph's life, what we continuously see, and you see it there in verse 2. Chapter 39, verse 2, what does it say? The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with him the whole time. The Lord never left him. He never abandoned him. He did not forsake him. So here, we see Joseph doing well, even considering the circumstances. Because the circumstances is that he's no longer with his family. He's no longer with people that he knows. He's been sold into slavery. And for all his brothers knew, they weren't going to be guilty of killing him. The people that bought him would be guilty of killing him. But not them. The blood's not going to be on their hands. The blood will be on those to whom they sold him to. But Joseph's life doesn't flip upside down immediately. He's going to find himself in some difficult territory. But Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And then the Lord was with Joseph. So he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. Did God have to do that? He didn't have to. But what's the purpose in all of this? Near the end, when Joseph's confronting his brothers, this is way later on down the line in Genesis. Y'all remember what he tells his brothers? He says, you guys meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And that's sometimes hard for people to wrap their minds around. Good? He's been sold by his brother. Well, originally they were contemplating killing him. But instead they threw him in a pit and they sold him. And he's doing well now. Things are going good. The Lord's with him. Joseph found favor in his sight, in not only in God's sight, but also as the servant of Potiphar. You know, Potiphar's like, man, this is great. I got a steal. I got a bargain. Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant. Made him overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. Came about from that time, he made him an overseer in the house and over all that he owned. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. And so thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge. And with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. And now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And so now we begin to see a problem arise. But everything's going great so far. He's being taken care of. God's taking care of him. And so because of that, Potiphar's also benefiting from God's care. Then introduce his wife. Oh, she's a wonderful person too, right? Yeah. I'm being facetious when I say that. I'm not being serious. This is more of a tongue-in-cheek. She's a wonderful person. So verse 7 through 20, that's on day 2 of page 26 in your book. You know, Joseph, he's a strapping young man, handsome in form, good looking. And she can't resist him. Somehow Potiphar just turned into chopped liver then. And he's the captain of the guard. You know, he can't be a slouch. He's not like a lieutenant sitting at a desk eating donuts all day. I mean, I'm really joking there. You know, that's not what he's doing. I mean, these guys were built. And she's really going to put him to the test. Lie with me. And Joseph says, no, I can't. I can't do that. Look at all that I have. Look at, you know, I know he doesn't tell his life story, but you can't help but think and wonder, you know, he has to kind of think back to his family and be like, man, a lot's happened to me, but I've been blessed. God has been taking care of me throughout all of this time. How could I go out and sin against God? How could I sin against my master who's also taken me into his house and has taken care of me? He says, my master, Potiphar, he's given me everything in this house. I have access to it all, except for one thing. And what is that? His wife. That's it. But boy, that rejection. And I'm sure we've all encountered maybe not something likened to this, but have you ever told someone no and then they pursue whatever it is that you told them no, they pursued it harder? Like they pursued it like just, it was a lot stronger. So they're trying to make their case of why you shouldn't say no. And so that's what she's doing. She's like, oh, how dare he tell me no? No one says no to me. I'm sure we've all heard that before. Maybe we've been the ones that said that. That's eye-opening. But no one tells me no. My master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There's no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I go do this great evil and sin against God? Now, I also want you to kind of stop and think, you know, a lot of people don't really come here to talk about marriage. Joseph understood what it meant to be married. He understood what it meant to be a husband faithful to his wife and a wife being faithful to her husband. In Matthew 19, what is it that Jesus tells those Jews? He says, in the beginning, it was not this way. Right? Because they asked the question, I'm paraphrasing, but you know, why did Moses permit folks to, I'm sorry? Yeah. Why does he permit you to divorce your wife? For any cause? And Jesus, you know, throughout his discourse with them, he tells them, it was not this way in the beginning. In the beginning, God intended it for you to, you leave your father and mother and you cleave to your wife. And the two becomes what? One flesh. And Joseph understood this principle. You are not mine to have. Potiphar's given me everything but you. You are not mine. Everything else is mine, but you are not. A lot of people would do themselves well to look at this example and tell themselves, you can say no. Problem is so many people don't have self-control. They won't tell themselves no. They say, well, you only live once. I got to live it out. And they come up with all the excuses in the world, and I get it. There are some really tough patches that people can go through, because you can have like a young couple and something medically happens to one of them. Doesn't matter who. I'm not trying to pick on one gender over the other. But let's just say one of them is unable to perform. And so that can be frustrating for the other spouse. And people have justified in their minds, well, since they can't perform, then I just got to go find it somewhere else. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. What is it that we always say in most marriage ceremonies? We say in sickness and in health, right? For better, for worse, till death do us part. That's kind of like the typical standard. That's not the exhaustive list. There's a whole lot more. You guys should have heard what all my grandpa said when he married me and Sarah. He said words that I couldn't even pronounce. When he was telling me, he said, "Repeat after me." And so he starts listing all this stuff, and I'm sitting there going, I can't pronounce that. But I mean, really, we say these things, and that's what it amounts to for some people. I'm just saying it just to get it over with. I don't mean it. But Joseph meant it here. He says, there's no one in this house greater than I. No one. And my master's withheld nothing from me except you. She spoke to Joseph day after day. He did not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. One day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was there inside, she caught him by his garment. Aha, now she got him. I've got evidence. Practically strips him naked, which just shows you the wild animal she was. Typically the roles are reversed. But it wasn't that way this way. She caught him by the garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. And when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called the men of her household and said to them, "See, he's brought in this Hebrew to us to make sport of us. And he came in to lie with me, and I screamed." Lie after lie after lie. And this is what Joseph is now encountering. The Lord's still with him through this all. The Lord's with him through the lies. But sometimes it's frustrating when you find yourself, somehow you hear through the grapevine that someone has been saying something about you, and you're like, well, where did that come from? Don't lose your focus. Don't lose your sense of just common sense. Don't lose your mind simply because someone else is doing something wicked. Don't lose your faith. Because if anyone had the right to stand up and shout, "This is not fair, this is not right," it's Joseph, because he's been fighting her. He should have been walking around with a walking stick. And then when she walks by, just poof. That's what he should have done. You ever heard the phrase, "I wouldn't touch her with a 20-foot pole"? That's what he should have been doing. Unfortunately, he's got a job to do. And she knows exactly which buttons to push. Because who's Potiphar going to believe? This Hebrew slave? Even though he's been benefiting ever since he's been there, or is he going to believe his wife? He's going to believe his wife. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home, and then she spoke to him with these words, "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to me to make sport of me. And I raised my voice and screamed, and he left his garment beside me and fled outside." When his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. But I don't want you to stop there. I want you to look at verse 21. So now he's put in jail. He's done nothing wrong that we know of. Okay, that's also something that has to be clarified. There's nothing revealed to us that suggests that somehow there was something questionable in Joseph's life, that he somehow had a twinkling in his eye and she caught that twinkle. Nothing suggests that. But now he finds himself in prison, and look at verse 21. But the Lord. I love those instances in Scripture where you see something along those lines. But God, or but Jesus, or but the Lord. The Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. I think for us, especially just in our brains, and if you're someone like me, you've only got 2 brain cells and they're trying to find each other sometimes. It's hard for us to see that God's still with us. It's hard for us to see that God is still extending kindness to us when we're going through these hardships, when we're going through something difficult in life, when something's placed before us, something that nobody should ever have to deal with. The Lord's still on your side. He still cares for you. He still wants to comfort you. And it might be hard initially, and it may be hard for the rest of your life. But if you take your eyes off the prize, you've missed it all. You take your eyes off of God, then what comfort do you have? There is no more comfort then. All Joseph can do is just throw his hands up. I don't know what I did. This is kind of one of the instances where I wish Scripture kind of invited us a little deeper into Joseph's life. Like, what was he saying? Or was he silent? Was he silent as Christ was silent when he was arrested and beaten and hung on the cross? I don't know. But I guess, in my mind, and just the type of disposition and just how Scripture portrays Joseph, I think he was silent. I think he just took it. I think he took his lumps and he said, somehow he had it in his mind, God's got me. I don't know how I'm going to make it through it, but I know that I will make it through it. And that comes easier for some than others. And so when we find ourselves looking at someone who's struggling, don't tell them to just suck it up, buttercup. Go down there and suffer with them. Weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. I know that's really oversimplifying it, but let me tell you something. Someone who's going through a hardship, it's going to be a whole lot easier for them to go through that hardship when they have people there holding their hand through it. And Joseph understood that. I think Joseph understood that God's holding his hand through this hardship. That's right. And he was also the judge. But God's on his side. He's the one that has the overall choice and power. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. And that's what we have to be able to see in our minds and in our lives. Not just in our minds, but see it in our lives. See the blessings in our lives. While going through the failure, while going through the turmoil, while going through the struggle, see the kindness of God in your life. See the favor that He gives to you in your life. Joseph found favor while in jail for doing nothing. So surely we can do something and find favor still. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, and so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. So you see, here again, everything's being laid at his feet. Hey, you're in charge. in layman's terms, or in modern day terms, he basically became a porter. He's got the freedom to just do whatever. As long as he stays there in that prison, he can do whatever he wants. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. It's hard to see this idea of prospering while in jail. But how often, and I don't know, if you've never been open or experienced prison, I'm not saying going to prison, but maybe talking with someone who's either been in prison or they've been a part of a ministry in prison, there are folks that change their lives even in prison. Now understand this, I have a little bit of insight on it. I used to work in it. And I worked with the worst of the worst. I was at Varner Supermax. That is literally the worst prison. That holds the most dangerous, the most vile, the most disgusting prisoners in the state of Arkansas. When there's someone who tries to escape, guess where they go? Supermax. When someone tries to murder an officer or murder a fellow prisoner, guess where they go? Supermax. Because behind every steel door is one prisoner. It's actually the safest one to work in, believe it or not. But, working in there and then working alongside the chaplains, because when the chaplains would come in, they'd always have to be walked. You'd have to walk alongside them and be with them, just to make sure that the prisoner didn't try to do something crazy to them and stuff. But there would be some in there who, for all intents and purposes, everything that I would observe and see, they were trying to repent and do the best they could to serve God in prison. And even the message of the gospel flows through those prison walls. Thankfully, I'm not the final judge. I don't make that call. I just trust in the Word. And I trust that if they repent of their sin and they obey the gospel, then God's going to save them. And He's going to care for them. And He will comfort them. He will extend kindness to them. Now that doesn't mean that whatever they did to society, that all of a sudden everything goes away. Guess what? They still have to face those consequences for the rest of their lives. Whatever it is that their sentence lays it out for them. And that's what Joseph's having to do. The sentence of his life that he's currently battling and enduring, he has to serve God faithfully through it. He doesn't get to say, God, I'm frustrated because I'm here and this is not just, this is not right. You have not extended kindness to me. This isn't kindness. How is being in, and let me tell you something, prison back then is not like prison today, where you get 3 hots in a cot and you're in heating and air conditioning. And the only way prisoners don't find themselves in the heating and air conditioning is if they do something really dumb and they find themselves in isolation 1 and 4. That is where the worst of the worst go. And if it's 500 degrees outside, then it's 500 degrees in their cell. If it's 2 degrees outside, guess how cold it is in that cell? It's 2 degrees in that. I hated working isolation. So, it's not pleasant. But God extends kindness even to the murderer. How do I know this? Think about Saul of Tarsus, who eventually becomes the Apostle Paul. Did God extend kindness to him? Absolutely. God revealed Himself to him. Jesus says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Why are you kicking against the goads? So sometimes we have to look at the bright side of life. And that's not always easy. And sometimes in the moment, we're frustrated, and we don't want to look at the bright side. But it gets a whole lot easier when we let go of our pride and our ego, and we let go and we let God. That's when it gets a little easier. I'm not saying that everything goes away. Your pain that you're going through, your suffering that you're going through, it's still there. God was with Joseph. Joseph goes to prison, but God was with him. What prison are you in tonight? Whatever prison it is, you need to remember, but God is with me. You turn over to chapter 40. Again, the Lord's not just saying that He's with him. He's just not communicating that He's extending kindness to him. Joseph begins to interpret dreams, which is also a sign of God is with him. He's proving it to Joseph. And so here in chapter 40, you've got the cupbearer and the baker. They offended their Lord, and they find themselves right alongside Joseph, right? Pharaoh's furious with his two officers, the cupbearer and the baker, so he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard in the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. And so Joseph's in charge. He took care of them. And then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in the jail, verse 5, both had a dream the same night. Each man had his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, why are your faces so sad today? And they said, we've had a dream, and there's no one to interpret it. So Joseph told them, he says, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me. Now, he's not somehow saying that he is God, but he understands the God that he serves. And he has not been given any reason not to trust in God. And I want you to think about what I just said. Joseph has not been given a single reason to not trust in God. And I think that applies to me, and I think that applies to you. There is not a single reason why anybody in here, anybody out there, should not trust in God. Now, I get it. It's easy to say that. Because you might be sitting there saying, well, preacher, you haven't gone through what I've gone through. You're very right. I'm 37, going on 38. And just for all intents and purposes, I hope I don't have to go through what some of you have gone through. But your testimony and your faith can preach to people. It can reach people. It can change and move people. Don't allow your sufferings to defeat you. Because Joseph could have just said, well, those guys, they had it easy in life. And now they find themselves in here. At least I didn't do anything to be here. But he says, no, interpretations belong to God, so you tell me what that dream is. So he continues to serve, even in confinement. So in our prison, whatever prison we found ourselves in, you can still serve. Okay, we've actually made great ground tonight, and I'm going to behave and not push us to 7 o'clock. So we're going to stop right here, because I don't want to try to get into the interpretation. I'll do the interpretation on Sunday. So we're going to stop right here. And I've talked a lot. Does anybody have anything they want to say? Floor's open. No disagreements, no additional points, no. That's right. That's right. And again, it's all about our outlook. Now, if we think that the Lord ought to bless us with $1 million, then we're not looking at it correctly. We're kind of missing the point. But if we see that the sacrifice that God made, and you see that's another thing too. Sometimes we just chalk it up. Well, God sent His Son. Jesus left heaven. He left everything. He had experienced heaven. He knew exactly what it was like. If any of us had ever tasted heaven, none of us, not a single one of us, would ever leave it. But Jesus left it. And He came to this earth. And He walked among men, knowing that He was going to die a horrible death. Even Jesus, being God on foot, experienced pain. He experienced suffering. He experienced shame. These are all things that we go through. But it did not defeat Jesus. He died temporarily. And then He was resurrected to never die again. And I think the same's true for us. We die temporarily. Jesus is the first fruits of our resurrection. Spiritually, if we're in sin, we're dead. And that can be temporary. If we will turn to Him, trust in Him, and obey Him, and we will be made alive, never to die again, if we remain faithful to Him. And see, that's the important thing. The Scriptures make it abundantly clear. Salvation's conditional. It's not, well, once you save, you punched your ticket, that's it. No, it can be taken away. If you turn around and walk away from the Lord, guess what? He's going to let you give in to that. And you'll answer for it. We're about to sing the song, Bring Christ Your Broken Life. Is there anyone in here that's broken tonight? If you are, this is a perfect opportunity to come to God, to seek Him out, to serve Him, so that you can have the kindness of God extended to you. So if you're here tonight and you need to put Christ on in baptism through the baptistry, we can do that. If you need the prayers of the congregation, we'll help you with that too. If you're subject to our invitation, we invite you to come forward as we stand and sing 911.